Thank you for inviting me to share my preliminary survey about church conflict in the evangelical. In my research, I investigate conflict management practices within the Palestinian Israeli Christian churches, focusing on the Evangelical Baptist Church between 1990 and 2014. First, let me, in the beginning, give a brief introduction about evangelicals. Who are evangelicals? The word evangelical has its roots in the Greek word of gospel and the good news. Evangelical believe in the centrality of the conversion or born-again experience in receiving salvation. Evangelicals also believe in the authority of the Bible as God's revelation to humanity. Also, they have a strong commitment to evangelism or sharing the Christian message. Evangelicals are growing around the world, and studies show that 100 million people in the United States are associated with an evangelical church, which is around 30% of the population. In Israel, the number of Arab Palestinian evangelicals is estimated at 5,000 people. Now, who are the evangelicals in Israel? Palestinian Israeli evangelicals belongs to 6 evangelical denominations in Israel. The Baptists, they have 18 churches. Assemblies of God, 7 churches. Open Brethren, 4 churches. Church of the Nazarene, 3 churches. Christian Missionary Alliance, 2 churches. And Plymouth Brethren, 7 meetings. Evangelicals are not recognized in Israel as an official denomination. In 2005, representatives from the first 5 denominations connected together in an association called the Convention of Evangelical Churches in Israel. Today, they are in the process of seeking recognition as an official denomination. Now, evangelical in Israel are a very unique minority. Let's have a look at this chart. This will explain a lot about what do I mean with that. Evangelicals, as Palestinian Arabs, they are an ethnic minority in Israel from the Jewish population. And as Arab Christian, they are a religious minority between the Arabs. Evangelicals, as a Christian, they are a religious minority among the Arabs. Now, as evangelicals, they are a denominational minority among the Christian. And the numbers here, about 0.06% of the population of Israel are evangelicals. Evangelicals, only 3% of Christian Arab in Israel. Okay. I'm doing my research on between the Baptist churches in Israel, and just a brief introduction about the Baptists. Baptists have been in the Holy Land since 1911. Most efforts have been put by the Southern Baptist Convention from the United States. Southern Baptists started the work and invested in it until early 1990. Remember this date because it's important, 1890. Right now, Baptist churches in Israel are no longer linked to Southern Baptists. They are organized under the umbrella of the Association of the Baptist Churches in Israel, headquartered in Nazareth. They are members in the Baptist World Alliance, a community of 100 million people. Today, Palestinian Israeli Baptists count only 3,000 people. and they are the biggest group among the evangelicals in Israel. Baptist churches are independent, self-governed, and have no bishop, as the traditional churches. They have a congregational form of government. The emphasis in this form is on the democracy as a basis for church government, where authority is ultimately held by the membership of the church. This is based upon theology of the priesthood of all believers. Now, although they are a very unique minority, they are influential. They perceive themselves as committed Christian. They believe they have a mission to be salt and light in the world, in their community and in their country. Several churches whom I have interviewed during my research have charity activities, working alongside municipalities to reach the needy and the poor. Also, we have the Baptist school in Nazareth, which is one of the excellent schools in Israel, and with a very high standard morally too. In the last statistic of the Ministry of Education, the Baptist school was rated the 4th in the country in the percentage of excellent graduates in the Bagrut exams. Okay, after this not really brief introduction, let's go to the research. The research question is, how do Palestinian Israeli Baptists deal with intra-church conflict? Since conflict-related splits or exits is easier to observe and measure than voice, I'm focusing on intra-church conflict that resulted in leaders' exits or church splits. Church split or leaders' exit from a church is a dramatic decision leading to a member's withdrawal from active participant in the congregation. Now, a little bit about the research plan. The research plan is designed to follow 3 main phases of field work in order to answer the research question. Now, my work is the research, I'm using qualitative research, so I'm doing interviews. I will explain more about that in a minute. The first phase was exploratory and aimed to identifying general patterns and to locate type of conflict management and categories to be used in case selections. In the second phase, 3 different case studies will be selected for comparison. The third phase of study will involve additional theological analysis using a theoretical model. I will share some findings from the first phase, which is a preliminary survey. I have conducted 13 in-depth interviews and 16 semi-structured interviews. And also I did participant observation in churches and in meetings in the Association of the Baptist Churches, and also meetings in some churches. Following are the results. Now, this chart gives information about how many splits and exits took place over 1 century. But I did, my interviews were mainly focused on this period, the last 2 decades. However, to try to locate if there were some splits or exits through or during this period, 8 decades from 1910 to 1980, I have interviewed missionaries who are almost 90 years old. I Skyped them. Most of them are in the United States. I also did interview some first Baptist generations who are also 1990 or late 80 years old. So I, in a way, can get some information about this period. Also, I've read some books wrote by missionaries who were working during this period. Now, when we look at this chart, we can see that most of the splits and exit happened during this period. And the question is, why? Remember when I was talking about missionary, I said the year 1990 is very important. It's the year when missionary left. So it's here. Now, why is this important? In this period, no splits were recorded in 8 decades. However, there were few splits both from members who didn't like the pastor. They went back to their original traditional churches, maybe, and also few pastors who were encouraged by missionaries to leave. It should be mentioned that during this period, missionaries, indirectly and through funding and as owners of church buildings, were the main decision makers. So it's we have here a different structure. As I said, churches, the Baptist churches are self-governed, independent, no bishop. But in a way, maybe, here we have a different structure of dealing with churches. Now, what is unique in this period? Why we have here in the 90 and 2000, we have more splits, and why splits suddenly stopped, and we start having pastors or leader leave church and found a new church. The common strategy between these two, between 1990 and 2000, was church splits. And between 2000 and 2014, it was more, the strategy was taking is more found a new church after an exit and not a split. In the last 10 years, conflict is mostly resolved by leaving rather than splitting. Now, it should be mentioned that this is splits and exit to find a new church. It's a common way of conflict management in the Western Baptist Church too. So I wanted to go back to this chart, and I wanted to see what is the difference, or if there is a difference, between people who decide to exit, to split, and between people who decide to exit. What's the difference between two kinds of these different strategies? And this is what I got. First generation Baptist born in the 30s and 40s didn't leave the church. They tried to maintain the status quo at church. This is a very traditional attitude of dealing with conflict, isn't it? If I want to go back a little bit to the chart, most of the people here were first generation here, right? Now, second generation Baptist, born in the 50s and 60s, struggled for change through becoming part of the leadership but didn't succeed. They finally split the church after conflict that lasted several years. So they didn't split the church in the beginning of the conflict. They tried to get into leadership, and after they failed to do that, they split the church as the final solution. But third generation, it's different. Although it's kind of exit, but it's different. They didn't struggle for change in the existing church. They decided to leave the church and found their own church. So there is a difference between the three generations. Now, three different generations respond to conflict differently in the Baptist churches. Now, after getting these results, I wanted to see what is going in the Baptist church in relation to conflict resolution is found in the Palestinian society as a whole. So in order to do that, I didn't do statistics and not really research. I went to the literature a little bit just to have a look what's going on about that. So in Atik's evaluation of history of the Palestinian community in Israel between 48 and 89, he has identified 3 different stages of response. I'm talking now about Palestinian Israeli. Shock, resignation, and awakening. Now, Rabbi Nobish and Khawla Abu Bakr describe the first stage as survival, second and third stage as worn out generation, and the fourth generation between and the third generation between 19 and 2014 is the stand tall generation. Now, survival generation, they are more loyal to their tradition, to their community. And they are survival generation too. But when we look about worn out generation, they ask for coexistence. They tried to get into leadership, but they didn't succeed. Now, stand tall generation, they were different. They demand full right as a condition for coexistence. The struggle against inequity, for them it's a struggle too against the previous generation, and also for ideology and gender too. Now, what I got, it's only a preliminary conclusion. The research is I'm still working in it. I should start doing the 3 case studies when I will dig deeper into the practices of the way Palestinian Baptists deal with intra-church conflict. But this is only primary results about my preliminary survey about all the churches. Now, it seems that the 3 different generations that were identified in the Palestinian Israeli society as a whole are identified in the Palestinian Israeli Baptist Church too when dealing with church conflict. It seems that 3rd generation Baptist who is more educated than the previous generation and more open to the outside Western world has integrated Western values that affected the way they deal with church conflict and adopted Western conflict management model. Church splits or exits between the Baptists in the West are common. It seems that it has been common too between the Palestinian Israeli Baptists in the last decade. However, church splits are not recognized as a conflict management model in the traditional hierarchical churches. Now, I'm not going to talk about this, but just, thinking about what are the factors that really affect what is going on in the Baptist churches. It's a new generation, which is more educated than their pastors, more openness to the outside Western world, influx of young leadership, no clear system of conflict resolution, independent churches, and also evangelical movement in the Holy Land. It's young. It's only 100 years. So this might be some of the factors. Thank you.
Una.
The first question is, could you clarify of the 5,000 evangelicals that you're talking about, what percentage of them are Palestinian citizens of Israel living inside Israel proper, so excluding Jerusalem, so I'm talking about in the Galilee region. And the second question, percentage of evangelicals that are Palestinian citizens of Israel living inside Israel proper. Okay, I just wanted to clarify that they are living inside, because I imagine a lot of them are based in East Jerusalem, so I just want to clarify that the 5,000 are actually inside Israel proper. Is that correct? Well, I have the microphone, I don't know what else to do. My question was, what percentage of the 5,000 evangelicals are Palestinian citizens of Israel living inside Israel proper, as opposed to in East Jerusalem? I'm just wondering if East Jerusalem influences the number. Or is that better? So that's really a clarification, and maybe you don't know. I don't know.
Well, this is the number that I've got from the Convention of the Baptist of the Evangelical Churches in Israel.
And the second thing is in terms of the numbers, relates to conversion to baptism. And my question there is, from what other churches do the adherents of the Baptist Church, primarily maybe in Nazareth, come? I've heard that we're talking about the Greek Orthodox Church. How much of a conflict does that create between the Baptist Church and other Christian churches around it as a result? So the question of conversion into the Baptist Church. Thank you.
Well, yes, there is a bit conflict, but not between all traditional churches. Well, in my interviews, at least, I can tell you that in 2 villages, some pastors say that they have some, hostility, but it's only verbal. But in other churches, I haven't heard about, having such conflict between Baptist churches and traditional.
I remember once talking about the evangelical movement with some priests and members of the community, and someone explained to me that unlike the Jewish society in Israel, that where there is a movement of returning, they call it Chazara b'tshuva, coming back to faith and becoming more religious. When Christian Palestinians are considering or rediscovering faith, they do it through the evangelical movement. So they don't become more traditional within their own churches. It's much more common to adopt any one of the evangelical churches. Do you think that's true, or is it just a rumor?
What is unique in the evangelical church that members of the church, they participate in the worship and they read the Bible together with the priest or the pastor. So there is more participation between the members and the leaders or the pastor who is leading the worship. So I think this might encourage people to come more to evangelical churches, as also it's all in Arabic, and it's a kind of conversion, yes.
Last question. Wow, that's tough. Oh, we take 2 questions. So please, Sami and Noah.
I'm wondering, let's take with the divorce. I mean, there is increase of divorce over the years in Israel, in the United States, everywhere. Why there is such phenomenal increase? Because women have more and more resources. They work, they have their own income and so forth. They can afford getting a divorce. Okay? Now, this is the explanation that I'm trying to also to suggest about why you have an increase of exits over the years. Exit means that you found in your church. You need resources for that, to find a new church. If you just split, so you don't need really resources. You just divide resources. So maybe an explanation that you have to take into consideration, which I didn't find in your and the list of your factors. Your list of factors are cultural, not class. This is class, but it's opportunity structure. So the opportunity structure from one generation to another simply increased. So people can afford building new churches that they didn't have this opportunity before.
But there is a tendency, there is a growing tendency to join other churches
No, not just. No, to establish new churches.
In the middle, there is a tendency to split, and then there is a growing tendency to join other churches, which indicates
she meant planting new Baptist church.
That's what the idea. So really, you have to consider a growth of resources. The new generation from one generation to another have a greater resources. They can afford it. That's it.
Noah.
I'm curious, in America, of course, and many of the groups that would have sent missionaries are known in the States anyway to often be more Christian Zionist leaning. And I'm curious if any of that theology is a part of some of the splits that have occurred. If there's sort of pressure to theological differences that affect the way that Palestinians or the conflict.
At least in my research, I didn't find that people. I haven't identified that the splits were because of theology and not even Zionism. It's theology.
Okay, thank you very much. Sorry, we have now 2